price is determined at the margin. And, this is true for commodities. This is true for a commodity like oil. If anyone was following the markets in 2020, for example, when the pandemic started and the economic shutdown started, the price of oil just tanked. And it doesn't really make sense, right? It's like no one was forecasting that oil was worth zero, right? No, we all know that oil is the most, valuable physical commodity in the world, but the price went so low because on the margins at that point in time, people were flush with oil and they knew that it was not going to be used in the near term. So the price can get really dislocated. So that's what happened with an asset like oil. There's similarities with an asset like Bitcoin. Prices are determined on the margin. So if there's a big buyer in the market, there's this concept of an order book. So there's people who are putting out sell orders that they're willing to sell their Bitcoin at a certain price. And there's people putting out buy orders that they're willing to sell X quantity of Bitcoin at a certain price. And basically just think of like the buy orders kind of just like chewing up all the sell orders. And that's really what's been happening for the last, 48 hours or really the last week, where the sell orders are coming in and someone's saying, I'll sell, whatever it is. So these would be big amounts, tens of Bitcoin, hundreds of Bitcoin on an exchange's order book. And then there's a big buyer, multiple big buyers in there saying, we'll buy that, we'll buy that, we'll buy that. So, and that keeps pushing up the price because people see this action and then they say, okay, maybe I'll sell a little bit more. It was kind of like a funny quip on Wall Street when the price of an asset would go up significantly in the short term. And someone would say, why did this happen? And of course they say why. They're really looking for like a fundamental answer explaining it. But then somebody would just say, oh, there's more buyers than sellers. Like it's just like repeating what's actually happening, but like that's what it is. So that's what's happening at the order book level. But I do think it's more interesting to talk about what's happening at the fundamental level. And that's where I think it's the nation state adoption or just, I don't think it's only nation states buying at this moment in time. It's the signal that presents to everyone. And other people I think are looking at this and saying, wait a minute, Bitcoin is what, $1.6 trillion asset roughly at today's price. And, pick your comparable asset, but gold is still about 10x as big. And, with all these things happen, that seems like a mispricing. And, the proper pricing, it's not 80K, it's not 90K, it's not 100K. So people are looking at that and saying, this is a good time to buy. Could Bitcoin drop to, 75K this week, 70K? Sure, it could. But I think people are looking at it and saying, I think I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be happy having bought at 83K or whatever we're at now when I look back, 3 months from now, 12 months from now, whatever it is. So that's what I think is happening. And I made the comparison to gold, 10x, but a huge narrative that Bitcoiners have been talking about is that Bitcoin is going to soak up value from other assets. It's not just from gold. It's from real estate. It's from passive investing in stocks. It's from seeing that bonds are likely not going to be a great investment on a real basis, probably for a decade, if you ask me. They haven't been they've been terrible for the last 4 years. I think that continues to play out for another 5 to 10 years. So all of that money, it's kind of, think of it like a competition. That money has to kind of go somewhere, and a lot of it's going to flow into Bitcoin. So I think, people like to use the innings analogy here, but we are still early in this game for sure.
What are your thoughts on the diminishing returns? And, that's one of the quips that you see now. It's like, oh, well, it can't go up that high because of diminishing returns. It can only take so much off of the other asset classes. It can only, people are always going to want to sell. Miners are always going to want to sell. Whales, people that hold more are always going to want to be selling. So there's always going to be sell pressure. What do you say when people come with that objection?
I think they are too early with that analysis, with that claim. I think there will come a time that is correct, but I think we're talking like Bitcoin's probably 10x from here to say that. There was this interesting pattern for the last few cycles where if you looked at a prior cycle's trough, the low point, and then looked at the next cycle's high, and then whatever that multiple was, it was kind of being reduced by 4/5 each time. So that was diminishing returns for sure. But then if you held that pattern true for this cycle, it was only going to mean that Bitcoin was going to go 4x from 4 to 5x, call it, from the previous low point. So previous low point was only 2 years ago, which is insane, by the way. We should probably just point out, how crazy is it that FTX was 2 years ago? Like, I remember being at Thanksgiving with my family, and this is my extended family who, like, I don't talk to every day, right? And they knew I left Goldman Sachs to work in the world of crypto to them. And they were just like, "Oh, John, I feel so bad for you." So that was only 2 years ago. Um, anyway, Thanksgiving is going to be very different this year. But, 16K, that was the previous low point. That pattern of diminishing returns was going to show 4 to 5x, call it like 65, 70K, if that pattern held true. We're blowing through that pattern right now. So when someone says diminishing returns, they could mean it different ways, but at least in that particular pattern of diminishing returns, like, it's already done. So, and yeah, I just don't I don't see diminishing returns happening in a world where all those things I mentioned, nation states, institutions, financial advisors, hedge funds, etc., individuals, they have not really even put 1% in a serious way. So there's going to come a time where we say, yeah, diminishing returns to Bitcoin, but I think we are far, far from that. This brings up a really interesting topic, which is just talking about the monetary aspect, because we could get into a lot of different things about what the Trump administration and the team has said they're going to do, what his supporters, think he's going to do, and will it live up to all of that? Because there's a lot of different, categories of things that have been talked about and people are expecting. But just focusing on the monetary side of things, it gets into this topic of dollar and Bitcoin coexistence. And, we've debated this on Cafe Bitcoin and Swan Signal, till the cows come home, and like, people have different thoughts on it. And it's like, how quickly is it going to happen? How is it going to happen? Is it going to happen in my lifetime, our kids' lifetime? And people have different views, and I get that. I'll just tell you where I'm at on that. And I'm in the camp that the dollar system will coexist with Bitcoin for a long time. And I'm not so sure that that's a bad thing. Not for the reason, I'm fully against central banking, fiat currency, fractional reserve, fully against it. But it is the system that's here. And if someone gave me full power, and, Trump and Ron Paul came to me and said, "John, you can do whatever you want to do to the financial system," I don't know if I would say, let's just nuke the Federal Reserve right away, because it's almost like you have a problem. It might be obvious by now that you shouldn't have done, X activity, but you did it. So you have to it's here. You kind of have to deal with it. Like, the military example would be Afghanistan, maybe in 2021, when our administration pulled out and it was an absolute disaster. You could be correct in saying, hey, maybe we never should have been there. But that doesn't mean you can just like exit and think everything's going to be fine. You have to be strategic about how you reverse things. So I'm in the camp that there's just, the US dollar system has been entrenched for so long that I don't think we can, or we even want to just like nuke it and say, hey, we're going to Bitcoin. And then, by the way, this brings up another tangent, which is, could Bitcoin even handle that? Like, the whole like Bitcoin scaling and Bitcoin payments is not there right now. And I don't think we want, 8 billion people in the world on custodial Bitcoin payments, because that's the only thing that works for 8 billion people right now. So I actually think you probably couldn't get rid of the dollar system even if you wanted to that quickly. And it might not actually be a good outcome if we tried to do it too quickly. So my view is the dollar system keeps chugging along for quite a while, and Bitcoin just keeps growing and growing. And it's not going to be growing in a straight line. We're in one of these times where this is like a step function higher in terms of adoption. But I don't think it means the dollar system goes away anytime soon.
you have the euro dollar, you have the dollar. I mean, you have like this legacy system. Then you've got the tether. And what that's doing is entrenching it almost more in a way. I would love your thoughts, just kind of how you see and think of those different currencies kind of being used and coming together. If you want the answer to that question right there, and you like that spicy clip, check it out here. Come on, we'll see you in there. But if you want the full interview in its entirety, all the spicy clips put together, and you're not going to want to miss it, believe me, then check that out here. Come on, we'll see you in there. Do it.